This meeting is called to order. We will begin with a moment of prayer or reflection. Thank you. The City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respect to all Indigenous peoples and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their cultural heritages and relationship to the land. All right, adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted. Moving on to item 5.1, adoption of the minutes. Medicine Hat City Council meeting September 6, 2022. Are there any errors or omissions to report? Seeing none, the minutes are adopted. We will now move on to the reports. Item 6.1, Administrative Committee meeting, September 8th, 2022.
The Council adopt the minutes of Administrative Committee meeting held on September 8th, 2022, as presented for the corporate record.
Second.
Comments or questions? Seeing none, we will vote. That's unanimous. Now moving on to business arising from reports, under item 6.1.
The Council direct administration to submit a community designation application subject to obtaining the results of the skills gap analysis report.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion that Council direct administration to submit a community designation application subject to obtaining the results of the skills gap analysis report. And that's unanimous.
The Council received the Destination Marketing Organization 2022 mid-year report for information.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion to receive the Destination Marketing Organization 2022 mid-year report for information. And that's unanimous. Moving on to item 6.2, Corporate Services Committee meeting dated September 8th, 2022.
Your Worship, I move that Council adopt the minutes of the Corporate Services Committee meeting held on September 8th, 2022 as presented for the corporate record.
Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion.
Second.
And that's unanimous. We'll now move on to business arising out of the Corporate Services Committee meeting that took place on September 8th.
Your Worship, I'm going to just change the order for the moment. So items, we'll start with that Council adopts the new Procurement Policy 0173 to be effective October 3rd, 2022. The Council adopts the new Spending and Commitment Authority Policy 0174 to be effective October 3rd, 2022. And that we receive for information the procedures to Procurement Policy 0173 and Spending and Commitment Authority Policy 0174 as approved by the Administrative Committee.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Robbins.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Clark. And through the chair, I'm not sure exactly who I want to direct this to. I'll look at you, Dr. Feltham. I'm just interested in more about the procurement policy because that had come up as an issue in the city several times. And of course, in our strategic plan, we wanted to make doing business with the city efficient, effective, and cooperative. Maybe not be the right word, but that's sort of the feel that we wanted, is to make it easy. So I want to know just a little bit about this procurement policy and how does it meet those goals?
City Manager Feltham.
Thank you very much. Through the chair to Councillor Robbins. What we are trying to do through this, and I will then pass it across to a managing director for further clarification. But what we're trying to do through this is to create a more efficient, effective, and nimble process. And so some of the revised structures are intended to ensure that while continuing to meet the needs of the city and ensuring that we get good pricing, that we're able to do this in a manner which can occur more efficiently, quicker. But why don't I turn it across to a managing director for some additional discussion.
Great. Thank you, City Manager, and through the chair. Our objective with the revision of the policy was really a few things. And the first one is when you look at the overall general principles that we've outlined, and I'll just go through some of the principles that this policy is intended to achieve. Number one, compliance, of course, with all the agreements, our municipal bylaws, applicable policies with the city. The second one is to ensure competitive procurement. And when we say competitive procurement, we're looking at the vendor community, that we provide fairness, objectivity, transparency, and also accountability as it relates to any procurement activities that occur at the city. The third one is a reciprocal non-discrimination and geographic neutrality. So it's quite a mouthful there, but essentially that we respect Alberta's trading partners and trading arrangements that we currently have that we're obligated to. And that means that we don't have preferences for local vendors, as well as other municipalities won't have preferences for local vendors there either. So it provides a level playing field for all vendors across Alberta. And the last one here in terms of principles is optimizing value through cost-effective and efficient use of city funds. It's been 2013 since the policy was last revised, so this is a significant revision. We utilized the services of Paul Emanuele, who is well known in the procurement law around the municipal side, especially. So we really valued his opinion in terms of how we went through this. We also considered and had meetings with stakeholders, including the Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Construction Association. Maybe the last thing that in response to your question, that I'd like to just highlight is it is really twofold that we want to try to achieve. Number one is to ensure that we're getting the best deal and value for the taxpayer, but also that we want to create a healthy vendor community and ensure that vendors are treated fairly and equitably as part of the process.
Councillor McGrogan?
Thank you. Through the chair, I made a few notes when I reviewed the procedure, and I guess I'm hoping for some clarity around a couple of the issues. Now, this obviously is the big picture. This is the procurement policy, and then from that obviously would flow individual procedures that how different departments would interact. So I guess my first question is there anybody will it down the procedures that actually affect a lot of the trades and what have you not, will it be adjusted because of this policy, or does it remain the same, the actual procedure for how, the actual engagement of contractors and subcontractors work? That's my first question. Let me just,
Okay, so through the chair, what council sees before it is a policy that we're asking council to approve. And with that policy, which includes general guiding principles, we've included detailed procedures which outline roles, responsibilities, more administratively, how would we actually execute and interpret the policy. In addition to that, we have other protocols that are on our internal website that provide a lot of guidance with respect to various departments within the city, if they're related to the whole procurement process on specific questions, what to do in this case, and which forms to use, and what are the definitions of all the forms and so forth. So it's more related to the process that's been defined. When we have clarity of process, I think it provides confidence in the procedures on how we execute this. So just to Councillor McGrogan, did that answer the question, or was there something in addition to that on that particular item?
well, it is high level. So I have experience with one of the protocols, and I don't want to get into the details of it, but I think it's fairly prescriptive about what abilities the managers have to disqualify contractors in relation to conduct and that kind of thing. So I guess I can have an offline about that, but I just was curious about kind of how that went. But I also had a couple other questions, if I may, and maybe I'll just, if it's okay with the chair, I'll hit them both. One is Comply Works, and I don't see it mentioned in the procedure. It's probably for a reason, and I'm wondering if you could explain why it's not. I don't think it's mentioned anyway, if I thought I'd reviewed it. So why Comply Works? So it seems that it seems to be a duplication of procedure and the Comply Works kind of procedure, and it may not be, so I'd love to hear about that. And is there any supplier of service that's exempt? I'm thinking of the moms and pops and some of the, I guess, low risk, grandma that's delivering her muffins to City Hall on a meeting day. Who has to go through this process? And is there anybody where are your exemption levels? If you could just explain those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. And through the chair, you refer to Comply Works, which is our tool, I'll call it, on how we gather and assess, let's say, qualifications around safety and not only safety, but also personnel and what the company looks like. And the reason we have that is to be able to make an assessment as to the ability for any organization to conduct work for the city. So we are also concerned about their ability to execute, as well as their safety programs, as well as their safety record. And so there is within Comply Works an ability to make a determination whether or not they're qualified to do work for the city or not. With that, we have a number of workers. If it's, I believe, less than 4 workers that work for an entity, there's actually a lower level of detail required. So for those smaller businesses, there would be less required as it relates to comply works. Councilor McGrogan, you had talked about what the exemptions are in terms of dollar amounts. Maybe I can describe it in those terms. So we do have low-value purchase orders, if you will, that are up to $10,000. And then we have another category from $10,000 to $75,000, which all of them we are requesting and requiring a competitive process to be followed. So let me start with anything over $75,000 will actually go through a formal competitive process where we actually post it online and that we invite a competition through a request for proposal. Anything between $10,000 and $75,000 is more of an invitational competitive process where we actually go out and pursue quotes from vendors, a minimum of 3 quotes. And of course, the safety aspect of that we would be looking at as well and considering that as part of the awarding process. And below $10,000, again, it would be a lesser requirement of detail, but nevertheless, we're looking for some sort of competitive nature of how we select those items as well below $10,000. I will say that competition is good for everybody, including vendors. You know, one of the items we want to make sure is that we have a healthy vendor community that's able to respond to requests, but also we want to make sure that we get good prices for the city.
So I'm sorry to the rest of council for monopolizing the time here, but I just want, there's just a couple of things. So comply works to me, having a look at it, you explained it well, so thank you. But it seems that the procedure covers comply works issues as well, not specifically comply works, but they seem to be covered as well in the procedure. So that's more or less what I was asking, is kind of why it would be in 2 places instead of just referencing, you know, the need for vendors to be comply works specific. So that was really, I guess, what my question was, and why there's kind of a there's 2 kind of drums of information. And the second one is around the pre-qualification, and so you kind of led into that a little bit. So if you have vendors that, at what level of service of those number values that you brought up do they need to meet pre-qualification specifications?
Okay, through the chair, I do have my manager of supply chain in the gallery, and I would love to invite Richard just to come down to talk about the pre-qualification piece. I know that Richard deals with this every day, and I think would be able to provide a good response.
Welcome. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself with your name and title for the record. Thank you.
Yeah, Richard Connolly, the manager supply chain. So I think the pre-qual, it's not based on dollar value. It's more on the type of service and the risks that may be involved. So it's scope specific. And again, depending on the specific need, there's a time and a place for pre-qual, and it can help fast track certain purchases where maybe the commercial side's addressed, and then you're just making sure people are available when you need them. So again, I think pre-qual is a good thing for, again, certain types of services that are required, but it's not a broad brush right across all purchases. So yeah, I hope that helps.
It does, thank you. I just wanted some clarity on that because it seemed a little confusing for me. And, you know, again, we got this on Thursday evening, so just trying to make sense of it in the bigger picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Knodel?
Thanks, Mayor Clark. Through the chair, my question is likely for Managing Director Eggert. I'm just curious about values-based procurement. I know we specifically talk about cost and accessibility, making sure that it's easy to do work with the city and that we're getting a good rate for what business we're doing with our vendors. But I am curious about if we, as an organization, are focused at all with employing or creating policy around employing those that have values that align with the organization. So for example, sustainability, the environment, HR protocol, so human resource things like inclusion. And I haven't found anything like that in our policy, but do we have anything like that in documentation in the organization?
So through the chair, we certainly utilize ESG as it relates to our investment portfolio. So all of our investment managers that we utilize would be scored on the ESG side of it. As it relates to procurement, we would certainly be looking at the environment side of it and their past performance in terms of what they've done previously with the city. But specifically a ESG policy as it relates to our vendors, we don't have that.
Does it exist, and would it be valuable for us as an organization in your perspective?
So it doesn't exist, that was your question? Oh.
The question is, does it exist anywhere?
There are companies that would have, that would be considering ESG and maybe have implemented. ESG would have absolutely additional cost related to it. And I think the question is for our organization is that, number one, is that something that we would like to pursue, understanding the additional costs that would create? And number two, the impact on local vendors. When you look at our local vendor community, any criteria that we impose upon them may take some of them out of the game. And so that's another question that we would need to consider, is that what would the impact be to our vendor community? So right now, when you look at our guiding principles, we want to make sure we get a good price. That's the one of the primary guiding principles that we've employed.
Councilor Dumanowski?
Through the chair to Managing Director Egert or Manager Connolly, I obviously we went through committee and had the chance to go through this, but I have a couple more questions. In regard to, well, to start maybe, I read somewhere, or maybe it was cited, that the amount of, the totality of competitive bids within these ranges in comparison to the full business case for the city on an annual basis, it was quite small, if I'm not mistaken. So that's not to take away from the fact that these are important changes. My first blush review of this at committee level, never mind today, was that, well, why are we doing this? What if it ain't broke, why are we changing it? And yet I've come to understand that there's still, regardless of the price point, there's a similar amount of rigor required, and therefore time, expenditure of human resources, et cetera. So when we're looking at streamlining things and catching up, if you will, to what other municipalities are already doing, and these are aligned with, international standards or national standards, it makes sense. But in the totality, it's not a significant amount, but still important. So with that backdrop, I guess a couple of questions around. One is around the need to get 3 quotes. So I'm curious, and maybe it's a quick and simple answer, but in the event that you are not able to get 3 quotes, what do you do? And maybe I'll just dovetail that with my other one around, does sole sourced or preferred sourced fit even in this category? I know in larger processes, we may do that for different reasons, and I'm thinking on our utility side or generation side, there are specific examples that have been cited there, but does sole source or preferred source still play into these evaluations, these totals? And again, what do we do if we don't have 3 quotes? And then I have one more question.
Okay, thank you for the question. And We are asking for 3 quotes. Your question, Councilor Dumanowski, is what if there aren't any vendors that are able to meet that supply or materials? We are looking at working with the chamber to create at least a local vendor list that our buyers would be able to reference, as well as we have other resources that we would use in terms of other buying groups, municipal buying groups or public sector buying groups that we could utilize as well to ensure that we meet that test of 3 quotes. So again, the 3 quotes is that's our request, and the purpose for that is to ensure that we have a competitive process. With respect to sole source and preferred source, you are correct that there would be situations where that would be valid and acceptable as you test that against our Northwest trade agreements. There's some cases where we would challenge that and say, even though there's a preferred source, if we have a preferred vendor that we like to deal with, that if it doesn't meet the criteria laid out in the Northwest Trade Partnership Trade Agreement, that we would have to go out for a competitive process. So sole source and preferred source, yes, as part of, you mentioned utilities as an example where we would have a manufacturer that provides a lot of the components and it wouldn't make sense to go to another manufacturer. But in some cases, that there's a checklist we have to go through, and if we don't meet the criteria laid out in this checklist, it doesn't meet the test. And so we would encourage that to go through a competitive process.
So just backtracking a little bit. So if we, I mean, I can't imagine there would be many instances where we wouldn't have 3 quotes. But what it presupposes there were a situation where we were not able to, or the public business community were not interested, or for whatever reason. It's probably, again, we can have that conversation later, but that was kind of more the genesis of my question. But thanks for the other information for sure. Just on the timeline for vendors to withdraw bids that's in an active competition. So I see there's some reference to that. Can you just elaborate on that? And is there the assumption by there being some clarity around that, or more rules around that this has been a problem in the past, or are we trying to be forward thinking and mitigate by adding more clarity?
Through the chair, Councilor Dumanowski, and I'm just trying to find that particular item here. The intention, here it is, section 3.21. The intention of this one is to clarify instances where a vendor can withdraw and where a vendor cannot withdraw. And when we looked at it in the existing policy, it just wasn't that clear. So this one is intended to provide clarity moving forward, so that everyone understands, the vendors as well as the procurement department, on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Thank you.
Councillor Hyder?
Thank you. Through the chair, to Managing Director Egert. From when we sat in committee and we discussed this, and I just want you to answer this for me. The idea behind the policy is just to better the business that we're doing with the city, and enhance our relationships with the vendors, and to streamline the work that we can do. That's the positive take off that. Is that right? Yeah, thanks.
Correct, yeah.
I just want to focus on the first page of the policy for a minute. So it has a statement, and then it has principles. What's the difference, and what is the purpose of the statement in the policy?
Good question, Mayor Clark. The statement is really call it a preamble to the policy, to the guidelines, and it provides a statement as to providing context on what we're trying to achieve. So in this case, it's really talks about sustainable and consistent practices, talks about obtaining best value for the organization, procurement processes that are open and transparent, and then compliance as well. So those are further detailed in the general principles down below that council, we're asking council to approve. So all of our policies have those preamble statements that really provide the context as to what is this policy trying to do and why are we bringing it forward to council.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if in future it might be sufficient to have the principles. So I think there's some redundancy there, but also I feel like when the statement refers to sustainable practices, I think maybe I read that a little bit differently than like just being internally, like where our practices are sustainable. I'm maybe misunderstanding what exactly that means, but that piece doesn't seem to be drawn down into the principles. And then I'm just wondering what the value of having both Principle 1, compliance with applicable trade agreements, and Principle 3, indicating that we will avoid preferential treatment of local suppliers.
Mayor Clark, number 3 is actually noted here for emphasis. The local preference issue comes up many times, and it's one of those items that we get queries from vendors as to, why can't we get the work? We're local, we have local people, we're driving the local economy. And so it was just put in there for, I'll say, emphasis that is really a requirement of our trade agreements that's laid out. So we've included it here as a principle because that really is a principle of how we've designed the procedures in the following pages.
I think my concern is it might be over-limiting the city. The local preference does apply, but not universally to everything under the trade agreements. And having this principle in means that we're going beyond what the trade agreements just, what they say. Just wondering, maybe I'm wrong about that.
So the intent is not to go beyond what the trade agreements are stating, but to follow the procedures of the trade agreements as it relates to local preferences.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to invitational competition. So that's the increase in the threshold for an invitational bid or requesting quotes from minimum 3 suppliers. I think that I appreciate the added flexibility for city staff in doing their procurements in a flexible and yet adhering to the principles, equitable, fair, and achieving value for money manner. To me, this also really suggests that we need to make sure that we are really in tune with the suppliers that are available. And I'm just wondering what efforts are already in place and what we could do to maybe improve our awareness of suppliers and people who we might want to invite requests from, but maybe we don't know about them right now.
That's a great question. I think what I've seen lately, and wasn't even aware of this, the Chamber of Commerce actually has a really good website promoting the vendors and the services they do provide. And I think we do need to educate our stakeholders here within the city about that. especially when we're on that spend between 10 and 75,000. Because I hadn't even looked at it, and it's like, I think this got brought up at the admin committee meeting, and I went back and looked at it, and it was like, wow, they have a pretty decent website already. Because we've typically been doing open competition for 10,000 and above. And now, when we get into this invitational, though, I think we do owe it to the community to promote, certainly, you know, the local vendor community and who can supply what. And it's there. We just need to look at it and start using it.
Thank you very much. This is just a general comment. I know that this is there's some new things in here, and I want to just make sure that everyone in city staff feels comfortable that, you know, we do realize that we want to always be improving and just have that process of continual improvement. And that sometimes means that you don't get it exactly right on the first try, but just being open to trying new things and reworking things when complications arise. So I anticipate that's the approach that you guys will be taking with this as well. Seeing no further questions, we will vote on the motion that council adopts the new procurement policy number 0173 to be effective October 3rd, 2022, adopts new spending and commitment authority policy number 0174 to be effective October 3rd, 2022, and receives for information the procedures to the procurement policy number 173 and spending and commitment authority policy 0174 as approved by the administrative committee. The vote is unanimous.
Your worship, at this time, I'd ask that council rescind procurement policy 0118 effective October 3rd, 2022, and that we rescind purchasing signing authority policy 0126 effective October 3rd, 2022.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion to rescind procurement policy number 0118 effective October 3rd, 2022, and purchasing signing authority policy 0126 effective October 3rd, 2022. And that's unanimous. We will now move to item 6.3, Public Services Committee meeting dated September 12th, 2022.
Mayor Clark, I move that council adopt the minutes of the Public Services Committee meeting that was held on September 12th, 2022, as presented in the package for the corporate record.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Councilor McGrogan?
Thank you. Through the chair, I was pretty topical right now in relation to the shelter services, and I'm just wondering if I could ask Managing Director Mastel just to give us a bit of a verbal update on, I guess, where we're at today as far as our involvement with that issue. Thank you.
Through your worship to Councilor McGrogan, so following Public Services Committee last week, there was some media coverage that outlined the ongoing discussions between the Mustard Seed and the current shelter owner, which is the Salvation Army. So the update that was provided to the media outlined a purchase plan from the Mustard Seed to acquire the existing shelter facility and continue the services that they are providing. Just a reminder that the shelter services are funded from the province of Alberta through an operating arrangement with the Mustard Seed. So the city doesn't hold the contract for shelter services or have any ownership in the facilities, but we're certainly aware and working with the groups in terms of just understanding the shelter services that are being offered to the community and looking to find options and ways to ensure service continuity. So it seems that there is a good path forward in terms of overnight shelter availability, but an ongoing request from this city council to us to look at longer term shelter options for the community, and we continue to do that work. So we will work with partners and stakeholders on that, and lots to do on that front, but the more immediate needs for shelter services looks like the parties most closely related to it have found a path forward for that.
Thanks for that. I know that we're not the funding source, and I really appreciate all the work that you and your folks do to get this right. So I know there's been a lot of work in the background, and just want to thank you.
Seeing no further comments, we will vote on adoption of the minutes. That's unanimous. Item 6.4, Council Employee Committee dated September 14th, 2022.
I move that the council adopt the minutes of the Council Employee Committee meeting held on September 14th, 2022, as presented for the corporate record.
I'll second that motion.
Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion. And that's unanimous. Item 6.5, Administrative Committee meeting dated September 14th, 2022.
I move that council adopt the minutes of the Administrative Committee meeting held on September 14th, 2022, as presented for the corporate record.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion.
Your worship, sorry, I didn't hit the buzzer in time.
Oh,
So-
sorry, Councillor Dumanowski.
If I could go back. So we're not glossing over certainly, but there is a bylaw amendment discussion before us for vehicles for hire bylaw. I'm on the right one, correct? Yeah. And so I know there's conversation about the need to make some changes here, and I'm just wondering if, for the public sake, who don't necessarily read the full package, if we could have just a high-level understanding of the kind of the need for this and the direction.
City Manager Feltham? Managing Director Pancoast.
Thank you, Your Worship, through the chair to Councillor Dumanowski. This has come forward at the request of the taxi providers in the city. Ultimately, as many of the rest of us are seeing cost increases, they are as well. They carry the burden of the vehicle itself, the maintenance, insurance, fuel, in addition to that dispatch fee monthly and a share cost to the tune of $20,000 to $40,000 as a one-time entry to be able to operate as a taxi service. And ultimately, they are facing costs that are making it difficult to continue providing at the service levels that they see today. So the request is to see an increase in the maximum prices that can be charged for use of the taxi services, as well as to shift from the current meter structure to a tablet soft meter structure. The latter offers a benefit of decreased inspection burden for our staff. And certainly, we are sensitive to the needs of the customers of the taxi services, looking to balance both the cost impact on them, but also the availability of taxis. We are concerned that there could be a shortage of taxi services available to those customers if the costs aren't recognized given general inflation.
Seeing no further comments or questions.
Sorry, Mayor.
Councillor Hirsch.
Through the chair, I think it's just important for, and it was noted in the briefing note that we do recognize that subsidies aren't available for the people that rely on the taxis that are not at a level of income that can afford this sort of increase. I think the reality that we're running into is I am sympathetic with both sides, especially when I look at inflation. I look at the cost of gas, even myself, and I'm a bit teary-eyed when I see that. And with the added scrutiny as indicated on some of the pricing. So I'm inclined to support it, but I do want to recognize that I've talked to many people that said, I just cannot rely on the public transit, i.e. the bus, to be able to fit my needs when it comes to a graveyard shift or working weekends or working holidays when sometimes the buses aren't available, or they're available but they're I think the routes get reduced in some cases. So I think it's just I just wanted to put it out there that I do acknowledge that that's an issue and a reality. And I think it's important for myself to think about that as I review this, because it is a balancing act. And I do note that it wasn't very long ago that council passed a bylaw for other rideshare organizations to potentially come to this community. So I think we're trying to do our level best, certainly to open up the playing field for other individuals to keep the supply and demand curve nice and healthy. And that would hopefully take care of, as we move forward, some very healthy competitive pricing for rates for our citizens. Thanks.
Thank you. I will note that we will be opening, the bylaw is up for first reading, so we'll be able to have debate on the actual bylaw at that time. Councillor Canoto?
Through the chair, thanks, Mayor Clark. It's just a confirming question. So as far as I know, and I'm pretty sure Councillor Van Dyke was informed about this, and perhaps Managing Director Mastel, the question of accommodations or subsidies through the cab companies. As far as I know, that does still exist. If you could just confirm.
Managing Director Mastel?
Through your worship to Councillor Knodel, I don't think the city specifically provides any subsidies for taxi fares, but there are a number of agencies in the community that do provide taxi chits to their clients, but that's a program separate from the city.
All right. Seeing no further questions or comments, we will vote on the motion to adopt the minutes of the Administrative Committee meeting held September 14th, 2022, as presented for the corporate record. And that's unanimous. Item 6.6, Energy and Infrastructure Committee meeting held September 15th, 2022.
I move that council adopt the minutes of the Energy and Infrastructure Committee meeting held on September 15th, 2022, as presented for the corporate record.
Second that. Councilor McGrogan got it.
Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Robbins?
Yes, thank you. Mayor Clark, I just noted in the minutes that the water bottle refill stations will be removed shortly. So in case any of the citizens of Medicine Hat were wondering, I just want to confirm they'll be back next year.
Managing Director Maines?
Sorry, there we go. Through your worship to Councillor Robbins. This year was intended as a pilot. We will review usage throughout the community. Their initial indications are, though, that it was quite a successful program. So I'm expecting a recommendation will flow through for, if not an expanded pilot, a permanent solution to be brought forth through committee and council for consideration. But at this point, it appeared to be a very successful trial.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Dumanowski.
Your Worship, just first comment, you can see from the minutes before you today, Managing Director Means is very keen on giving us plenty of updates on many important items, and I mean that genuinely. It's much appreciated. Two of them I wanted to reference, and I know there's been lots of conversation in the past and of late around the commodity update and in relation to rate setting and locking in rates. So I know the news did a great article again about that, and there was certainly a higher level of, not urgency, but importance brought to the community, the reading community's attention around this. We can't be, and I'm certainly not in the position either to indicate to utility holders to lock in their rates or not, but there are considerations out there, external factors that go beyond our locale, certainly, and internationally, that can play and wreak havoc on rates and thereby the stability or instability factor when it comes to that. So it's a consideration. I'm always astounded when I hear, I think only about half our utility holders are doing that. Not trying to influence anyone, but it's interesting because there certainly is enough, there's been a lot of attention to it. So I draw that attention one more time today. And the other one is as simple as it is, the right-hand turn at the base of Dunmer Road Hill. Little things like this, sometimes in a mid-sized city you get excited about, but I can tell you there's been a lot of feedback, positive about that. The poll in the paper wasn't as enthusiastic, but it was still a majority. But it'll be interesting to see how things like this play out. And the reason I bring it up, and I know it's similar types of conversations have been brought up here, though, how our staff are looking at not just big picture things, they're looking at small ones and responding to community needs and shaping it accordingly. And the things like a right-hand turn at the bottom of a hill may seem insignificant and trite, but they are important to the vehicular traffic movement and what people might see as courteous or common sense driving. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes, but I look forward to that and again bring attention to it that it's looking to be in place here in mid-October. Thank you.
Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a simple question about the Recycling Roundup that occurs typically once a year. Where could we direct the general public to if they have these things during the year and don't want to wait for that once a year roundup?
Managing Director Mains.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to Councillor Knodel. Certainly our landfill is set up to take hazardous chemicals and waste. Unfortunately, it can be a bit of a journey, but it's very important that our residents utilize that opportunity from that side. If there's something of special concern, they can always reach out through our staff, and we can give them guidance in terms of where we can accept it, when we can accept it, and if not, we can also provide guidance in terms of where they can dispose of hazardous goods. But we highly recommend and support for preservation of the environment for all of us, that those goods be properly dealt with, and we'll do our best to help out.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, we will vote on the motion to adopt the minutes from the Energy and Infrastructure Committee meeting held September 15th, 2022, as presented for the record. And that's unanimous. Item 6.7, Public Services Committee meeting dated September 26, 2022.
I was all prepared to make a motion as it's presented, but I noticed a slight typographical error. So I will just note I would like to buy a vowel, and that is the letter U. And under the Medalta 2021 Annual Report, second paragraph, second line, beatification should be beatification. I don't think they meant to beatify. I knew Councillor Dumanowski would enjoy that reference, so if we could just change that to a U, I would then be very happy to move the adoption of the Public Services Committee meeting that we held on September 26 as amended for the corporate record.
Second.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion to adopt the minutes of the Public Services Committee meeting held September 26, 2022, as amended for the corporate record. And that's unanimous. Moving on to item 6.8, Administrative Committee meeting held September 28, 2022.
Through the chair, that council adopt the minutes of Administrative Committee held on September 28, 2022, as presented for the corporate record.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote on the adoption of the minutes for the Administrative Committee meeting held September 28, 2022, as presented for the corporate record. And that's unanimous. Moving on to reports for reception. Item 7.1, Municipal Planning Commission, held September 14th, 2022. And we have one item of business arising from this report, and that is at item 9.2.
Your worship, move reception of the Municipal Planning Commission minutes of September 14th, 2022.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments from council before we vote? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion. And that's unanimous. Item 7.2, Municipal Planning Commission, held September 28th, 2022.
Your worship, move reception of the Municipal Planning Commission meeting of September 28th, 2022.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion for reception. And that's unanimous. Item 8, unfinished business. We have one item, 8.1, bylaw number 4711, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend dishonored payment fees set out in bylaw number 3224.
Mayor Clark, I'd ask that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 4711, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend dishonored payment fees set out in bylaw number 3224.
Second.
Any debate or questions? Councillor Sharps?
Comment or no? Okay, you said debate or questions, just want to clarify. Nope, just clarifying. So I was the one that commented on this last week and forced it to go to third reading, and it's not that I have a problem with this in itself. We have to cover our costs. My worry is that it's the underprivileged that are getting the late fees. So it's the vulnerable already that are running late. So that was my concern, and I just wanted to make sure we really thought about this. Those that are sitting around this table aren't the ones that have dishonored payments. So it's the vulnerable, it's the ones that are struggling, and it's just potentially another burden for them. So I just wanted to make sure that we had talked about it and that, you know, as an organization, we just understood what we were doing. However, I also know that we have cost to recover. I also know that our customer service is exceptional and we'll try to work with them. We just got to get people talking to them as well and feeling comfortable that they can phone customer service and really encourage that. So thanks, Dennis. I just wanted to say that.
Councillor Hirsch?
And I appreciate certainly the comments Councillor Sharps indicated. I think I'll put my banker hat on and really challenge anyone in the community that doesn't know to write a check or otherwise to know that it's going to be dishonored. So it's about budget. I certainly appreciate the intentionality in terms of your comments, Councillor Sharps, I really do, and I'm sympathetic to that as well. But all of us really have a onus of responsibility to make sure from a perspective of paying your bill that, you know, I've seen time and time again where people purposely would write a bounce check, and I don't really have a lot of sympathy when you're actually trying to do that sort of thing. So I totally agree, prices are escalating all over the case, and I am sympathetic, but, you know, I'm okay with this as it presented, because there is recoveries, so, thanks.
I'm gonna look to Managing Director Egert, but feel free to pass it along. Can you please just remind council and the public, if you are a person who has concerns about whether or not they might be able to make a payment of their electric or gas utilities or any other utilities, what would be the appropriate steps for them to take?
Okay, thank you, Mayor Clark. This particular fee does relate to a dishonored payment fee, which is a check that doesn't clear, or even an auto withdrawal where there's no funds in the account. As an alternative to that, and you did mention the customer service group, that customer service is always open to making payment arrangements. It does require a phone call into the customer service group to say, I can't make my payment, can we work something out? And we are, especially over the last few years, more than flexible in working with all customers and coming up with those kind of arrangements. Also, I want to say that where there is auto withdrawal that's been set for a particular date, please call and say, can you just defer that for a day or two until I'm getting a check in or money in my account. So again, we'll work with customers as they do that. So we are actually quite sympathetic in that regard. And I would say that as it relates to other utility companies within Alberta, I think the fact that it's municipally owned really puts it through a different lens. And so I appreciate these comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharps.
I just wanted to comment on that, Dennis, and just reiterate, it was last year, I was tagged on in a Facebook post for a lady that was really struggling, and I reached out to, might have been you, I'm not really sure, but it was a Friday night, and I'm gonna say within 7 hours, this lady was taken care of. She was incredibly happy. It was a very cold time. So I know you're not just saying those words, I know that it happened, and I'm very grateful for that, because she was very much one of our vulnerable population, and couldn't believe just tagging me in a post that got escalated all the way up and everybody was on board taking care of it. So truly, that customer service department is amazing. So, and it's more than one story that you hear about that department, so.
And thank you for that. I really appreciate that, and I'll pass that on. And I want to say as well, customer service has also the ability to advocate for utility customers and put them in contact with other programs that are available either through the provincial government or for community agencies within Medicine Hat.
Very much appreciated. Thank you. Seeing no further questions, debate, or comments, we'll vote on third reading of bylaw number 4711, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend dishonored payment fees set out in bylaw number 3224. And that's unanimous. Under new bylaws, we have item 9.1, bylaw number 4709, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend Vehicle for Hire bylaw number 4617. And this bylaw is eligible for 3 readings with unanimous consent.
Through the chair, that council give first reading to bylaw 4709, being an amendment to bylaw 4617, the Vehicle for Hire bylaw.
Second.
And we will vote on first reading. That's unanimous.
through the chair, that council give second reading to bylaw 4709.
Second.
Any questions, comments, or debate? Seeing none, we will vote on second reading of bylaw number 4709. And that's unanimous.
And through the chair, the council unanimously consent to have third reading of bylaw 4709 at this meeting.
Second.
We will vote on the motion for unanimous consent for 3 readings. And we have unanimous consent.
And through the chair, the council give third and final reading to bylaw 4709.
Second.
Are there any questions, comments, or debate at this time? Seeing none, we will vote on the motion to give third reading to bylaw 4709. And that passes unanimously. Item 9.2, bylaw number 4713, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend land use bylaw number 4168 to redesignate 1752 10th Avenue Southwest as General Industrial District. This is an item requiring a public hearing, which will occur on October 17th.
Your worship, I beg leave to introduce bylaw number 4713, being a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend land use bylaw number 4168 to redesignate 1752 10th Avenue Southwest as General Industrial District.
Second.
Are there, this first reading, so we'll vote on the bylaw. And the bylaw has received first reading unanimously. Moving on to item 9.3, bylaw number 4693, a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to amend land use bylaw number 4168 to rezone 155 Ash Avenue Southeast from community service, CS, to high-density mixed use.
Your worship, I beg leave of council to introduce first reading to bylaw number 4693, being a bylaw of the City of Medicine Hat to rezone 155 Ash Avenue Southeast from community services to high-density mixed use.
Second.
So this is also a bylaw requiring a public hearing, which will occur on October 17th. Are there any questions? Oh, sorry, we'll vote. And that's unanimous. There are no notices of motion, but there is new business under item 11. Item 11.1, Police Commission Bylaw and Policy Review. And this was a notice of motion properly served at our last council meeting. And so, Councillor McGrogan, would you like to speak to your motion?
I would. I guess I'll put that on the floor first. The council direct administration to conduct a review of bylaw 1651 and all related commission policies and report back to council with recommendations to enhance transparency and fiscal responsibility.
I will second that.
Okay. Thank you. So just to speak to this, and I've just made some notes, so I want to make sure that I guess my intentions are clear and transparent. So with the resignation of our previous police chief, I just started to review the mechanics that set out the relationship between city council and the police commission. Obviously, in my former life, I was quite familiar with the relationship between the chief and council, but not so clear on where city council really fit in. So it took me to bylaw 1651, which sets out the relationship, which was established actually in 1973. And it's had several revisions through those years. So But all the revisions are basically related to procedural, the number of people that are on commission, the different repeals. So generally, it didn't speak to the relationship. And it really, to me, it didn't, so there was no kind of guideline around how we share information. And I always say, you know, you've got a wall, and we can call it the Berlin Wall if you like, and we've got the police commission on, and the police service on one side of the wall, and city council, and probably in my previous life, I probably put the barbed wire up there and the gun turrets and really kind of set a solid wall. But I think through different experiences I've found, especially now that I'm on council, that it might be really important that what we have is more of a good neighbor fence than a wall. And I'm completely attuned of what needs to be police commission business and the police service business, but I think there's times when we could communicate a little better. As elected officials, I think there's always questions that are asked, and there's needs to be, I guess, a way that commission feel comfortable and that council feels comfortable interacting. So this caused me actually to look at all the other municipal bylaws, and so under the Police Act, each municipality that has a police service has to have a bylaw that basically discusses that relationship. So there's Edmonton, Taber, Calgary, Lacombe, and Lethbridge. So when I reviewed all those bylaws, it seemed that they all spoke to some regard, some more than others, about what that relationship between council and commission looked like. And we're silent to it. So it really, I guess, I looked at it and said, well, you know, there's really an opportunity for us to really open up the wall for just for transparency's sake, and if, you know, council can feel comfortable asking questions that we're basically allowed to ask under the provisions of the Act. So that caused me actually to speak to the Director of Policing for the province of Alberta, and his name is Marlon DeGrand. And he signaled to me that basically that it was a very good thing. He agreed with council reviewing the bylaw, and he wholeheartedly agreed to and offered the Solicitor General Department that they would basically be pleased to assist and review any final drafts to ensure that the Police Act intent is still met in regards to, you know, privacy of police operational issues and et cetera. So having said all that, I really think that if we consult with our police commission, with the public, the director of policing, and the government of Alberta, that we could actually make a better fence, a better good neighbor fence that would allow for a little more transparency. And I think even from a police commission perspective, I don't want to speak for them. I've never been there, nor do I want to. I think that it'd be good to know what I always talk about lanes, like what lane are you in and what lane should you be in. And if we all know what is our lane, and so let's create a highway that has proper lanes that create better transparency between council, commission, the public, that we all are aware of, then I think that we're all going to be better off. So they are basically the reasons why I brought this to council. And I ask for your support in causing this to be reviewed and brought back to council. Thank you.
Councillor Sharps?
Thank you. So just in response, Councillor McGrogan and I have actually talked about this before, so I wasn't surprised and shocked by it. And I'm actually in full support of a review, but my support is in a review of administration, going back, finding best practices, policies, and coming back with where we differ, where we're weak, and making suggestions based on that. I too have spoken to Marlon DeGrand, and I think that, you know, before the Solicitor General's office gets involved, we as a council see what best practices are through administration and come back. I totally agree that if whatever we can do better, we need to do better. But I also want to make sure that we're honoring that police commission to the point where it has been for the last 30 years, where there was an agreement there in place, and we honor that, kind of like, is it Cypress View? That's, yeah, kind of the same thing. So I just want to make sure that we are respectful of the process and our best practices, and we're not like trying to attack the commission here, because I'm very sensitive.
Councillor Dumanowski?
Well, Your Worship, I'm glad that I had the opportunity to hear my astute colleague, Councillor McGrogan, speak to the request, and not because I was confused by it, but I think he's owning the fact that he, in his former life, many years in service and devotion to our police service in a very respected manner, and now on this side of the wall, if I can use that vernacular, having had the chance, obviously after all those years, to look at it from a different view. There's no interference call here. There is no desire to broach the wall or breach the wall in a way that would be materially problematic or in contravention of the Police Act. So I respect this. I think it's useful and productive. I do know, having spent more than half of my council years on the commission and having to report back to council or play that role, both two hats, we intended certainly to live up to the spirit of the Police Act and our need to report to the check writer, that being the city, when it came to services and not meddling with operational decisions, et cetera. But there were times where the councils of the past attempted to creep into that a little bit more than they ought to have. But I think we've had a harmonious relationship. Certainly a review of this will only bring to light any gaps that are there and look at best practice. I know that's terminology that's used everywhere, but the more we can be front and center with our service and our community and create that relationship will only enhance the services we rely on and benefit from and our transparency to the public. So I applaud you for doing this.
Councillor Canodal?
Through the chair. So I look forward to seeing how the communication strategy, I suppose, evolves. I often have questions about police-related concerns that I can't necessarily answer, and I think if there is evolution in our strategy and we're able to have even more dialogue, I think there's nothing but benefit to that. It makes sense to me, and I think that we certainly need to have boundaries, just the same as council and administration, but we can work a lot better with administration if we are open and have communication, as long as we're honoring those boundaries. So it's nice to know, it will be nice to know what boundaries exist so that we can work within them.
So my only concern is just in terms of timing and in the context of the broader legislative plan for the city. So I just wanted to check in with City Manager Feltham.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. If we could come back to council and let you know a little bit more about the timelines and that, we would want to give this, appropriate consideration. But we would certainly hope that we could come back even with a plan of action for how we would advance this within the month.
All right, seeing no further, Councillor Dumanowski?
Did we vote on this, or are we voting? Sorry. Okay. I thought you were ending the meeting. I apologize. I jumped the gun.
I wouldn't put it past me. Councillor Robbins?
Yeah, I just, before we get to the vote, I just want to be clear that at least me personally really respects the members of the Police Commission, and I agree with Councillor McGrogan. I'm going to vote for this to pursue to see what the best articulation of our relationship should be, but I certainly have nothing but respect for the work that they do, and I have no desire to go anywhere near that fence or over, much like Councillor McGrogan, and I want to stay well away from that fence, but I think it will be good to to set up those definitions for us, for the police and police commission as they change members over the years as well. As we change this table, they change as well. So, but I certainly have so much respect for the work they've been doing so far. So just wouldn't want them to think that this motion was not respectful to them, because I think we all feel the same way.
Agreed. Seeing no further speakers, we will vote on the motion. That City Council direct administration to conduct a review of Bylaw 1651 and all related commission policies and report back to council with recommendations to enhance transparency and financial accountability. That is unanimous. Seeing no further business, our next city council meeting is October 17th, 2022, and this meeting is adjourned.